Okay, everyone, this is week 5, beginning of week 6, video part 2, costume change, glasses. Thought I'd liven it up here. So in my last video, we were talking about the title and we were talking about the front panel or the intro panel or the front matter. Now I just want to say a few things about the order of the slides that, the images that you're picking, and then the individual text that goes with them. So one thing that we did a lot of talking about this past week in the small groups was thinking strategically about the story you're telling and the ordering of your images. That can be really important. That is a really important aspect of this assignment, right? You want to start out with something an image that kind of sets the stage for what you want to talk about, and then you want to make sure that you're closing with a strong image that is going to help you to end your story. And then you want each of those images to connect to one another in such a way that your reader is kind of wandering a path and reading this story as they go. That I think that's very important. For example, I'm going to give an example of Maya. Maya is talking about queer identity and picking images that kind of address issues of queer identity. She had found an image that kind of set the stage for what these artists were responding to, and it was an image that I'm trying to describe the image. I should have a picture of it. But it kind of addressed white male privilege and cis privilege, and so she was going to start with that particular image to kind of set the stage and say, okay, here are the things that are in operation right now that these artists are responding to. And then another good example of kind of starting and ending is Jessica's museum exhibit project, because she is starting with an old Cindy Sherman, and her particular exhibit is about photography and identity. So she's starting with one of those old Cindy Sherman's untitled film stills and kind of saying, okay, well, here is an artist that's responding to the male gaze, and then she's ending with the Cindy Sherman's Instagram account. So it's a kind of a nice bookend, and that Cindy Sherman Instagram account kind of addresses the two things that she's interested in her museum exhibit, which is the performance that women put on for other people, and then the kind of technological advancements that we've made in terms of photography. So thinking about that story, where are we starting, where are we ending, and thinking about that ordering of images. For some of you, this might be chronological, right? Jalen is doing a project about women in sculpture, and for her, it makes sense to start with the earliest image and end with the latest image. That will not work for everyone, but it may work for some of you. So kind of thinking strategically about that order, I think, is really important. The last thing is the text for each of the images that you pick. We've gone over how to write exhibit label text with our first assignment, so you definitely want to go back to the comments you received there and kind of think about those suggestions I made as you're writing your exhibit labels for this particular assignment. Ginny from the National Museum of Women in the Arts actually referenced the Museum of Modern Art's slideshow about writing exhibit labels. And that was a reading I had assigned at the beginning of the semester. So going back to that and kind of looking at that particular slideshow, seeing the do's and don'ts of exhibit label writing might be a good way for you to kind of refresh your memory and then revisit the text that you are writing. In the case of this assignment, that museum label text can talk to other museum label text in the exhibit. So again, Ginny from the National Museum of Women in the Arts said it's perfectly fine in an exhibit to have labels that refer to other works in the exhibit. So she showed a still life, and she referenced an earlier image by Judith Leister in that still life exhibit label. So she said something along the lines of, just as Judith Leister does X, Y, and Z, this particular artist does A, B, and C. So that is an option for this particular assignment as well, to kind of do that referencing and making sure, you know, when you're weeding out, I guess, or whittling down your museum label, to think about the details that best tell your story. So Elizabeth, who came to talk to us, she was the very dynamic woman that asked a lot of questions. She was saying that, you know, you want, when you're given a lot of information, and she did this exercise with you all about Alma Thomas, here's all this information, what are you going to pull out? What are you going to highlight? And you're going to do that for these images. You're going to think about, okay, well, what's the information I have about these images? And then what am I going to pull out that helps me to best tell the story of my exhibit? So knowing somebody's born in Dayton, Ohio, right, might not be important for your exhibit, right? If you're writing about something like autobiography and telling your own personal story about identity, maybe it is more important to talk about how this particular artist is, you know, a Black woman or something like that, if she's exploring issues of race and gender in her photography. Maybe Dayton, Ohio piece is a little bit less important. So kind of figuring out which facts to pick and choose to best tell the story of your exhibit, okay? Now, those are the 4 pieces. The 2 other things I want to talk about are kind of my expectations for when you turn it in. I want to talk a little bit about the presentation and how that will work, and then I want to give you a sense of when my office hours are going to be, okay? First of all, since we didn't have an opportunity to really dig deep into your exhibit labels this past week, instead we were kind of looking at the big global picture, I took one exhibit label from each of your drafts, as long as you had given me a draft, and I put that up on a Google Doc, which I'm going to send to you. If you would like, this is optional, if you would like, you can go ahead and respond to the person that I've paired you up with and give that person feedback. I know that some of you were not able to fulfill the requirements for peer review for this past week, whether it be posting something on time or posting a complete draft or showing up to a meeting. So this would be a way for you to kind of get a little bit of A, extra practice in terms of critiquing, but B, to kind of make up for some of those points, if you will, that you might have lost on your peer review grade, by kind of doing this one extra activity. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, that would be great. We'll put a deadline of 5 p.m. on Monday on that. That way, if you have commented on somebody, they will have that feedback and maybe be able to incorporate it into their presentation. So that's one thing. You can be looking for that particular link. The second thing is about presentations. So the presentations will happen next week. I want to remind you that you are giving a presentation in which you have 20 minutes. 10 minutes of that time should be for the presentation. So walking us through your exhibit, talking about the images that you've selected, telling us your story. I would expect that whatever form you put this in, PowerPoint, Prezi, whatever, you would have the full text of your front matter, your intro panel, and then you would have the full text for each label so that we can see what you're writing. With the full text for the label, I want you to also include what the women on Thursday were calling the tombstone. So that would be the artist's name, the title of the painting, the date, the medium, right? That information should go with your image as well. And if you could give me a word count at the end of each label, that would be amazing. Because then we can start to think to ourselves, okay, well, if I've got 700 words for this label, maybe I need to pare down, right? Or if I only have 50 words, maybe I need to add a little bit more information. So just putting a number to that information, I think, will be useful for us. You will do your presentation. You're paired up with somebody who is your respondent. So it's your responsibility to get your presentation to your respondent sometime before your presentation so that they can see it. So give them enough time. I mean, I would say 5 p.m. the day before. Send them your presentation so that they can review it, because the respondent is going to be the person responsible for starting the discussion. So they will want to have seen your presentation ahead of time so that they can get in their head, okay, well, these are some of the things I'm thinking about as I'm reading through the presentation. These are some things I want to ask, okay? In addition to attending your partner's presentation, so the partner or the presentation for which you're responding, I want you to attend at least 3 other presentations. So 20 minutes for each of those is an hour of your time synchronously for the week. So if you could do that, that would be great. Then we have a little bit of an audience for each of the presentations, hopefully. If the times don't work for you, please let me know, and we will have to figure out some kind of alternative assignment so that you, are able to receive credit. Now, a question came up today about the way in which the course is structured in terms of whether or not there will be any extra credit opportunities or if there will be any options for revision. And I explained to this student, and I thought it would be useful to share with the whole class, that the way that I structure the class is I weight each assignment. So the first assignment is worth 10%, the second assignment is worth 20%, the museum exhibit is worth 30%. So that each assignment gets increasingly worth more, because I find that students, as they go through the course, begin to learn the kinds of things that are expected of them and tend to perform better as the semester progresses. So to me, that's kind of your curve, if you will. I also have those particular categories that are intended to help you boost your grade, right? That would be the presentation, which is 10%, which as long as you're there and showing us your stuff and it's complete, you should be good to go. We have a peer review grade, which again, as long as you're posting on time, showing up with and giving feedback, you're fine there. I've been keeping track of that all semester and checking it off. And then the engagement portion is 20%, right? And the engagement portion is just how engaged were you in the online setting, right? And this is something that you are going to evaluate for me next week. So you're going to do a self-evaluation in which you tell me what you think you have earned in terms of engagement for the course. Now, engagement comes in a lot of different forms. One of the ways to evaluate it is through the discussion board. So looking at your grades in the grade book, saying, okay, well, I have a majority of check pluses. That shows that I was engaged and present on the discussion boards. The other things that are up on gradebook, such as the midterm evaluation or the introductory video or the comments for Kanchan Balze, right? Those are just things I've been keeping track of throughout the semester so that you can refer to them and say in your engagement self-reflection, I did the midterm evaluation, or I sent comments to Kanchan Balze, right? I've been recording them not necessarily because they're worth something in terms of points per se, but because it will help you to kind of make your case for whatever it is that you feel you earned for course engagement. So that's something to kind of be thinking about, right? Anytime you ask a question in a guest lecture, right? Anytime you might show up to a presentation and ask a question. All of those are different ways to engage with a course. So that's something else I wanted you to have on your radar, okay? Last thing, and then I'll stop talking, is open office hours. So I'm going to have open office hours as long as everything is okay with my husband. I will plan on having open office hours on Monday. And I'm going to schedule them and I'm writing it down, 1 to 2 in the afternoon. So people who have a flexible schedule and can pop in can do that between 1 to 2. And then I'm going to do them 7 to 9 at night because there are quite a few students who are working during the day, and then we have some people overseas, so it makes sense to do the 2-hour block from 7 to 9. I figure if there's 15 students registered for the course, 3 hours should give enough time for people who want to pop in and ask questions to do so. So I will just create an office hours between 1 and 2, and then one between 7 and 9. You can come in, ask your questions. If another student's there, just go on back out and then come back in a little bit. It's just kind of like waiting in the hall. And then that will give everybody an opportunity to check in before their presentation if they would like to. And then the presentation serves as your second draft, if you will. You have time to make those revisions based on the comments you get during your presentation. You have time to implement those revisions before the due date on Friday, okay? So that's where we're headed. I'll write this up too in an announcement so that you have the video, you have the announcement, and then you will also get that Google Doc link from me, okay? All right, have a great weekend. Only one more week. One more week. All right, have a good night.